Morning, everyone. Okay, we are up to Perek Bey's Mishna Zion, Chapter 2, Mishna Zion. And today, this week's learning has been sponsored by Debbie Robinson in memory of her husband, Morris N. Robinson, Moshe Nachum ben Yaakov. Ha-seicher es ha-poya l'ktzais imoy bata'enim. A person hires a worker to spread out figs for drying. Omar loy, and the worker says to his employer, Amanas sho'eichal te'enim. I'm working for you on the condition that I can eat the figs. Oichalu pater, he can eat, and he's exempt from having to separate any kind of trumas and maisris. Amanas sho'eichal ani ubeisi, but if he said on the condition that I and my household can eat, oisheichal b'ni bischari, or he says that my son should eat as my wages, hu oichalu pater. When he eats, he is exempt. He can eat. He's allowed to eat, and he's exempt from separating. And his son or the other family members mentioned in the first condition, they do eat, but they have to separate trumas and maasros before they eat. So what's happening is like this. The Torah allows a worker to eat from that which she's working on. That is a right that the Torah gave a worker. We'll see soon exactly when that applies. But the point is that in this case, where the person is hired to take the figs to spread them out for drying, during that point of time while he's spreading them out to dry, the Torah gives him a right to eat from the figs. That's a right the Torah gives him. It's not even his wages. Now, if he would have been eating figs based on his wages, if that would have been part of his payment, meaning, or let's say somehow or another, he's eating beyond what the Torah gives him the right to do. So the fact that he now gets these figs for his wages is the same thing like buying them. And as we have learned, that when you buy produce, that you have to go ahead under certain circumstances. When you buy the produce, you have to go ahead and you have to separate trumas and maasros while you are under certain circumstances. When you buy, the buying is what's kaveh l'maiser. That's what sets it to maiser, and you can't snap from it anymore. So yesterday we had the case where the person was buying the figs, and he was picking them off the tree. And we say if he's picking them off the tree one by one, he can eat, which is snacking, without separating anything. If he takes two together, then we say if he takes two together. And that's what and then the purchase takes place, and you have a purchase. He's not allowed to snack on until he separates trumas and maasros from it. So here the question is that when this person is working and he gets the figs for his wages, when will it be considered like he's buying it? When will it be considered like he's not buying it? So the Mishnah tells us like this: when he gets hired to spread out these figs, he says to an employer, I'm working for you on the condition that I eat from the figs, which means he's saying my wages should be eating figs. You're not going to pay me money. I'll eat figs instead. That's not part of his wages. He has a right to eat figs, so the Torah gave him a right. It's nothing to do with his wages. And when he's eating based on what the Torah's right is, what the Torah gave him a right to do, that's not buying. That's what the Torah gives him. So he can eat from them, and without having to separate trumas and maasros because of the fact that there's no purchase here to say that it has been kavula meiser. That now it's set to the obligation of meiser that you that you have to separate trumas and meiser before you snack from it, because that's the right the Torah gives him. But when he starts saying me and my family, his family has no right. When he says me and my son, the commentaries say what he really means, even though he says my son should eat for my wages, what he really wants to do is say that my right of eating should transfer to him. So either you have a case where he says, I'm going to eat here from these figs, but I want my family also. Again, he's putting this all in the context of wages. And he says, me and my family can eat. or my son should eat for me. I'm not going to eat, he's going to eat. I'm essentially trying to transfer my right to him. Says the Mishnah, what you eat is what you're eating because Torah gives you a right, and therefore you don't have to separate Shemus and Meiser from it. What your family eats, the Torah never says your family has a right to eat. They can eat because of the fact that the owner of the fig said he agreed that this will be part of your wages. Part of your wages will be that your family can eat. But that's wages. If it's wages, that means he's acquiring it. That means that's the same thing as buying it. And therefore now when his family eats, they cannot eat until they separate Shemus and Meisers from it. And in the case where he's trying to transfer it to his son, the Mishnah is saying he can't. The right that the Torah gave you to eat is for you, the worker. It's not transferable. Now, but you said it should be for your wages. Your son should eat as your wages. All right. So the owner says, fine, those are the wages. He can eat. No problem eating. However, being that this is considered a purchase because he's getting it. He's giving it to his son because now this is the payment for his wages. That's like buying it and giving it to his son. And the son will not be able to eat until he separates Trimis and Meisers from it. That's the first case of the Mishnah. Now the next case follows the similar pattern. The condition, he says, is when he's being hired, he says to his employer, I will spread out the figs with you. I'll spread out the figs for you on the condition that I can eat while I'm spreading and after I'm spreading. That's what he makes up his wages. So says the Mishnah, B'shas HaKatziyah, what he eats while he is spreading, he can eat and be exempt. Torah gave him a right to do it then. It's not part of his wages. So he eats and he's exempt from separating Shemus and Meisers. There's no purchase here to say that something is being Kaveh Meiser, that something is now saying that the obligation of Meiser is here to the point that you can't snack from it. Ula Harah Katziyah, but what he eats after the spreading, at that point, he can eat. Those are his wages. But because it's his wages, it's like purchasing it. And if it's like it's considered purchasing it. So now it's Kavul Maser. He's not going to be able to snack from it until he separates Shemus and Meisers. So although in his condition when he set up the wages, it was what before and after. Okay, so before the Torah gives you a right, you can eat without separating. After, you can eat. It's part of your wages, but that's like buying. And therefore, you're going to have to separate Shemus and Meisers before you eat from it. And the Torah and the Mishnah now really sums up the point. Because in this case of after spreading it out, he's not eating because of the Torah's right. He's eating because of his wages. Zaklal, this is the rule. If you're eating based on the right that the Torah gave you to eat, you will be exempt from separating Shemus and Meisers. Except from separating Shemus and Meisers at this point where you want to snack. But if you're not eating based on the Torah's right, but it's part of your wages, chayav, then you can eat. It's part of your wages. But before you're going to eat, you're going to have to separate Shemus and Meisers because getting it for your wages is like purchasing it, and therefore that is Kaveh Meiser. That will set it to Meiser to the point you can't snack from it. Okay. Chavetz Chaim. This is the 11th possible prohibition one can transgress when speaking Lashon Harah. Everything we've written until now, he's talking about if he tells the Lashon Harah one person to one person. Or he hears from one person. But if he connects himself to people who are speakers of Lashon Harah, in order to speak with them Lashon Harah, to tell them Lashon Harah, he wants to be part of the crowd. Or he wants to hear it, wants to hear the juicy stories. You now transgress the prohibition, what the Torah says, do not follow after the majority to do what's bad. Which is a prohibition against joining up with people who are doing the wrong things, av shehem rabim, even though they're a majority. So it's not just only because they're a majority does the prohibition apply. It's even if it's a majority. And if it's not a majority, but you're joining up with others, all the more so that you shouldn't be following them. When there's a majority, there's a thought to think, you follow the majority. Torah says, you don't follow the majority, do what's wrong. At the same time, the prohibition is not only focused where there's a majority, it means when there are multiple people, when there's more than one person involved. When you already have a group of people, that's what it means when it says achari rabim, after the majority. It means after a group of people are doing that. So if you go ahead and you join up with a group of people speaking Lashon Harah, then you are transgressing that prohibition. Later on, when we get to the positive commands that one disobeys when speaking Lashon Harah, there's a positive commandment also disobeyed when you connect yourself with these people who are doing the wrong thing. And then again, the Chavetz Chaim reminds us of what he wrote previously in paragraph 4, where he brought down from the Mishna, from the Tana, the sage of the Mishna, Belezer, who wrote a will to his son to be careful not to join up with people speaking Lashon Harah, because anybody there, even though you're not a main contributor, but you're there, you're part of it, you are inscribed as part of a group of evildoers in heaven. And that person certainly doesn't want that to happen. Next, Yud Beis, the 12th prohibition, the imhu machzik b'machlokas aydei sipurei. If now by speaking Lashon Harah, you basically strengthen an argument. There's a machlokas, there's a dispute going on. You walk over to someone, tell him something about the guy he's fighting with. What are you doing by that? You're just strengthening the argument. You're fueling the flames even more. If that's what you do, you have transgressed the prohibition. Not to be like Korach and his assembly. The Talmud in Sanhedrin teaches us that when the Torah says do not be, that there will not be like Korach and that his assembly, that means to be a warning to people not to be like Korach and his assembly. Korach led a rebellion against Moshe. He created discord within the Jewish people. And the Torah says that things should not be that way. And when the Torah says it shouldn't be that way, it means a prohibition, as the Gemara says, not to create, not to strengthen arguments, not to create them, not to strengthen them by not allowing them to calm down. This all falls into this prohibition. And therefore, if that's what Lashon Harah does, you have also transgressed this prohibition of not being that things should not be as Korach and his assembly did. Have a wonderful day.